Today's topic is all about educational theory. We're going to look at the work of some of the most influential theorists in our field. These guys champion the play-based movement. They are the reason behind why we do what we do every single day. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist whose most noted contribution to the field of education was his characteristics of pre-operational thought. His constructivist theory emphasized the connection between thinking and learning. He believed that learning was an interactive process between children and their environment. He believed that children, when actively engaged with their environment, constructed their own knowledge about the world around them. He suggested that this is how children develop schemas. A schema is a mental codification of experience. Piaget believed that children's learning occurred in 3 distinct phases. The first phase is assimilation. This is where children make connections between new knowledge and existing knowledge. The second is accommodation. This is where children use their newfound knowledge to alter their existing knowledge. The third phase is the equilibrium. This is where the newfound knowledge results in a changed behavior. From this, Piaget developed 4 stages of cognitive development. The first is the sensory motor period, from birth to 2 years. In this stage, the baby is learning by doing, by tasting, by touching, by looking. They have a primitive understanding of cause and effect, and they start to develop object permanence by 9 months of age. The second stage of development is the pre-operational stage, from ages 2 to 7. In this stage, the child starts to use language and symbols to communicate. They're also very egocentric. That just means they have a hard time understanding other people's perspectives. And if you've ever worked with toddlers or preschoolers, then you know this is true. The third stage is the concrete operational period. This is from ages 7 to 11. In this stage, the children's thinking is still very concrete, but they begin to have a more mature understanding of cause and effect, reversibility, and conservation tasks. The final stage is the formal operational period, occurring between ages 12 to adulthood. In this stage, individuals start to develop abstract thinking, including logic, deductive reasoning, comparisons, and classification. There are many characteristics of pre-operational thought. Egocentrism is self-centered thinking. Young children see the world from one point of view only, their own. If you ask a young child what daddy wants for his birthday, they're likely to respond, a train set or a toy car, because they can't take dad's perspective in mind. This also inhibits their ability to show empathy. Animism is the lack of distinction between living and non-living things. Young children will often think that something is alive, even if it's not. A young child who believes that a ball rolling down the hill is actually after her believes it to be alive. Literalness means that children believe in concrete definitions. If you say to a small child, "I almost died laughing," they might come to you concerned that you almost died. They don't understand metaphors or sarcasm, so be careful what you say to them. When I was teaching, I used to always tell my parents, "I'll believe about half of what they say about you if you believe about half of what they say about me." A lack of class inclusion means that children can only think in terms of one thing at a time. They may be able to identify bananas and grapes by their names, but not understand that both of those things can also be called fruit. My 2-year-old daughter does this all the time. I'll give her all these kinds of options for lunch: chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, or grapes, and she'll come back to me and say, "No, I want lunch." Many young children cannot understand that they can live in both Louisville and Kentucky. They cannot understand that you can be in 2 categories at once. Young children also have a lack of understanding with space and time. They have no understanding of personal space. Which is why in the classroom, oftentimes, we help them define their personal space with a rug or a hula hoop with their name on it. Time is a tricky subject for most young children. If something happened yesterday, it could have happened last year, last month, or 5 minutes ago. It's all the same to a child. Young children also have a lack of reversibility, which means they can only focus on the here and the now. This is why they have difficulty with cause and effect. Young children also display a lack of conservation. This means that they judge only by appearances. We see this all the time at snack time in our classrooms. All the children are given the same size graham cracker. One child leaves it whole, another breaks it in half, and another breaks it into 4 little pieces. All the children at the table, including the kiddos who broke up the pieces, believe that the child with 4 pieces has more than everyone else. It's not fair! He has 4 crackers and I only got 1! Young children don't understand that the quantity remains constant, even though the physical state of the object has changed. In this stage of development, young children can't understand what we mean when we tell them to use their words. Their vocabulary is extremely limited. What reservoir of knowledge do you expect them to pull these words from? This is why, more often than not, we see them jump to physical expression. They are also unable to think in terms of right and wrong. So be patient with them. Their understanding of cause and effect is still developing. Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who believed that children not only learn through interacting with their environment, but also with the people around them. He believed that children learn best when they were paired with an older peer or an adult who could help them through their zone of proximal development. The zone of proximal development is the range of tasks that a child can perform with the help and guidance of others, but cannot yet fully do on their own. He believed that young children learned best when they were given tasks that were just above where they were developmentally. When a task has become too easy for a child, or they've already mastered it, they can become bored or frustrated, and they're not operating at their most optimal state of mind. In the same way, assigning a child a task that is far too complex will cause them to become overwhelmed or even be fearful of trying. Both of these types of approaches are developmentally inappropriate and don't promote learning or mastery. As a teacher, it's important for us to continually assess the zone of proximal development for each of our students. Because every child is different, and every child learns in their own unique way. Observe your children when they play and when they problem solve, and pair them with more experienced peers so that they can reach their fullest potential. Vygotsky believed that children learn best through play. He suggested that through socio-dramatic play, children learn to take on higher level roles to help them regulate their behavior. For example, a young child who's pretending to be a mommy in dramatic play may take on motherly roles. She may hold the baby and feed the baby or read a book with the baby. She might even sit and read the newspaper and drink a cup of coffee with the daddy. She defines her actions during play according to the knowledge that she has of a mother's role. Vygotsky believed that this type of pretend play helped children develop self-regulation. This is the ability to control thinking, behavior, and your emotions. By allowing young children to engage in this kind of socio-dramatic play in the classroom, we give them opportunities to develop skills that will follow them for the rest of their lives. Vygotsky theorized that children learn through interactions and conversations about familiar concepts in order to form new knowledge. In education, we refer to this as scaffolding. In other words, children take a concept that they're familiar with, talk about it, play with it, and then form new knowledge based around those new experiences. Urie Bronfenbrenner was a Russian-American psychologist whose most noted contribution to the field of education was his ecological systems theory. His work focused on the impact of a child's social environment on their development. When we think about Bronfenbrenner's theory, we often think about little nesting dolls that each fit inside of one another. His theory is comprised of 5 different elements that contribute to a child's development and their ability to learn. Microsystems are the direct people and institutions that impact a child's development. This might include the child's family, friends, school, church, or neighborhood. Mesosystems refer to the relations that go on between microsystems. For example, if a child's parents has a great relationship with their teacher, then the child is also that much more likely to have a great relationship with their teacher. Exosystems describe situations or events that impact the child even if they were not directly involved. For example, if a parent were to lose their job, it would directly impact the child's access to resources, wealth, or even opportunities. Macrosystems describe the impact of culture, community, and even society on a child's development. Macrosystems are vast and can include demographics such as socioeconomic status, whether your family is rich or poor, location, so whether your family lives in the city or the suburbs, ethnicity, language, and heritage. All of these factors contribute to a larger cultural context. Chronosystems describe the patterning of events and transitions that happen in addition to socio-historical context. For example, the birth of a new sibling or the separation of parents. And finally, we move on to Howard Gardner, an American psychologist whose most noted contribution to our field is his theory of multiple intelligences. I love Howard Gardner, and I use his approach daily in the classroom. He believed that learning was manifested in a variety of ways, that there was no one right answer, that children were predispositioned to excel in some areas over others, that we are all unique, and that we all learn in different ways. Linguistic intelligence is manifested through the written and spoken word. Children with this type of intelligence learn best by speaking and writing and telling stories. Logical mathematical intelligence is often displayed through numbers and reasoning. Children with this type of intelligence are great at working with numbers, patterns, and problem solving. Visual spatial intelligence has to do with a child's sight and their ability to design. Children with this type of intelligence can visualize the three-dimensional world with ease. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence relies on the child's physical capabilities. Their balance, their coordination, their agility, their ability to skip, walk, run, and climb. Musical intelligence relies on the identification of tones and pitches and patterns. Children with this intelligence have a sensitivity to rhythm and beat. They love to sing, hum, dance, listen to music, and play instruments. Naturalist intelligence is based on the understanding of living things in nature. These children love hiking, gardening, and learning about the world around them. Interpersonal intelligence relies on our relationships with others. Children with this type of intelligence are better able to understand empathy. They work best in groups, sharing and collaborating with others. Interpersonal intelligence is based around your own self-reflection, your metacognition, and your inner state of being. These types of kiddos prefer to work alone and pursue their own interests. Existential intelligence refers to an understanding of things that are going on beyond the immediate realm of reality. Children with this type of intelligence may reflect on life, death, and spirituality. They are deep thinkers and sensitive feelers. Gardner's contribution was so important to our field because it helped teachers understand how children came to the learning table. By understanding your children's dispositions, you can help them learn in ways that are developmentally appropriate for them. And in that way, we all become a more cohesive community of learners.